Everybody, welcome back to Phil 101. Today we're talking about Plato's Symposium, and I've asked you to focus on the speeches given by Aristophanes and by Socrates, and we'll also be talking a little bit about the role of Diotima in this dialogue and some other thoughts about women in the ancient Greek period. So the context of the dialogue is that there's a dinner party being held at Agathon's house to celebrate his winning a prize for the best tragedy in his first dramatic contest. So typically these tragedies are written by people with a good amount of money because they need to be able to fund a lot of the production. So it's a really big deal that he's won. Everybody's really happy. And so basically this symposium, the Greek word symposium, is another name for a dinner party, or in this case, a drinking party. So basically they're about to have the fancy ancient Greek version of a rager. And when they all greet each other and they get together and they're happy and, they get to talking about love, the way that Plato portrays it. Eriksen Marcus, who's the doctor in attendance, they all have kind of different jobs, different roles in Greek society. And the doctor says, I propose that each of us give as good a speech in praise of love as he is capable of giving in proper order. And so basically the dialogue goes down the line, supposedly around the room, although Plato himself sort of skips some people who are allegedly at this dinner party. And then everybody's supposed to give their own version of a speech praising the god of love, which is one of the reasons why the symposium is a long-lasting and well-loved piece in ancient Greek philosophy. The first person to give a speech is Phedris, who's a beautiful aristocrat, and we'll be talking more about Phedris because I ask you to read a little part of the Phedris, which is Plato's dialogue featuring this guy. And he gives a kind of generic praise of love as one of the most ancient gods who gives the greatest goods. And he says love provides guidance for living well. And, he says lots of nice things about lovers and beloveds. But in particular, he says the lover is kind of even better than the beloved because the lover is the one who bestows love, right? And this is going to be the subject of a little bit of disagreement. Some people think the beloved is better than the lover, and they have different positions about who or what has the noblest role in this love relationship. One important thing to highlight, of course, is that this is ancient Greece, and as we probably know from even popular culture, the ancient Greeks practiced something which we do not really practice in the modern day, at least not in the Western world, in industrialized nations like the United States, which is pederasty, or basically relationships between older men and young boys. And they are often sexualized relationships. So when they talk about love here and they use the lover and the beloved in male, iconography, with the iconography of an older man loving a younger boy, they really do mean kind of the full scope of a romantic relationship, although it's not going to look that much like a romantic relationship that is stereotypically portrayed today, right? And one of the things that this shows is that conceptions of love and appropriate objects of love have changed culturally over time. That's not to say, and this has always been my stance, that we can't maybe criticize or dialogue with some of these views if we disagree with them, right? Like, we no longer think it's okay for people in a position of power to take advantage of or pressure younger people into relationships, and we have laws against that. In ancient Greece, it was kind of the opposite of that. People thought that these were good sorts of relationships for boys and older men to enter into, partly because they were considered to be a way for boys to be introduced into older male society. So like an older man would take you under his wing and kind of mentor you, and it would be kind of like a romantic relationship. And they would bring you to their social events, and they would show you sort of how they behave in their day-to-day life. And ideally, they would give you some sort of education in kind of adult society. Usually these would be like younger teenage or middle teenage boys who would be entering manhood, right? They'd barely be developing, you know, beards and things like this. And so the sexualized relationship came along with this, in that it was kind of expected that some of these relationships would evolve into romantic relationships. And in the background here, of course, it's important to remember women in Athens in particular were often expected to stay behind closed doors, to not have, you know, relationships out in the open. They were not going to be invited to public spaces the way that men were invited into public spaces. And so, you know, anthropologically, one might wonder, is this sort of something that developed kind of as a response to the unavailability of, you know, more heteronormative romantic relationships between young people? Like, is this kind of a pressure valve? Does it release some kind of sexual tension, or is this just like really preferential? Is it more that like homoeroticism could, you know, be more prevalent in other cultures or in Greek culture, and it just sort of has a different place than what we see it now in the United States after periods of different sorts of heteronormative conservatism and things like that. I don't know exactly what to say about this. I'm not an anthropologist, but the fact is that because women were often, you know, off limits for relationships, unless they were hetairai, unless they were courtesans whose job it was to kind of to have these types of relationships with men, like well-to-do women were off limits. And so for a lot of people, if they wanted an intense intellectual, but also kind of romantic, you know, relationship with some intrigue and push and pull and things like this, the norm was young men are beautiful, older men pursue young men for their beauty, and like the thing that the young man gets in return for all of this, that the boy gets in return for all of this, is an introduction into society and a sort of mentorship with an older man. So I've just said quickly, Phedris believes that the most praiseworthy partner in the relationship is the lover, because you know, the lover will die for their beloved. The lover will provide guidance for the beloved for acting well. And you know, the lover will be embarrassed to be seen badly by the person that they love, right? Because they want to impress them. And so basically he thinks this drives people to do better. But it comes out, of course, that love isn't always noble and praiseworthy. As we know well, you know, relationships can go wrong. People can be in unequal sorts of relationships. And people can also act kind of, you know, in strange ways when they're in romantic relationships. We can be put in our emotional extremes, you know, and behave in ways that we might characterize as irrational. And so some of the speech givers in this dialogue sort of switch up the game a little bit and kind of qualify their particular praise of love. Kind of in response to this, the next speech giver, Pausanias, talks about two kinds of love. He says, look, there's two kinds of Aphrodites to begin with. There's Urania, the sort of heavenly Aphrodite, and Pandemos, the sort of common Aphrodite. And so there's two loves that go alongside these two Aphrodites. There's sort of common Aphrodite, who is random and vulgar. He says she's sort of instrumentally oriented, or love from this Aphrodite is instrumentally oriented toward sexual gratification. So what we now think of as erotic love, right? But eros is the word for love in Greek. So here, erotic commonly has been made to mean sexualized, right? So common Aphrodite is kind of random and vulgar. She's instrumentally oriented towards sexual gratification, whereas heavenly Aphrodite, it inspires attraction to the male because it is stronger and more intelligent, says Pausanias. So heavenly Aphrodite's love is not lewd, it's not sexualized. So there's there's kind of a qualification here. There's an acknowledgement that sometimes purely sexualized love can have some flaws associated with it. There's something that like is less noble about it. There's, even in this context, a need to differentiate between sexualized romantic love and kind of more what we would call now, right, platonic romantic love. The next person to give a speech is Eriksen Marcus, who's the doctor, and he hilariously gives his rather boring and a little dry speech, supposedly with the background of Aristophanes, who's a comic poet. He's a writer of comedies. Allegedly, he gets a case of the hiccups, and he's hiccuping in the background the whole time that Eriksen Marcus is talking during his speech. So it's a little bit of like dramatic comedy inserted here by Plato. Eriksen Marcus's theory is that love is something that occurs everywhere in nature. It's not just a force in the human soul. And this might be an intentional callback, right, to some of our pre-Socratic philosophers who suggested that maybe love was a dynamic force in the universe, a force of attraction, right? And Eriksen Marcus is characterizing love in that way. He talks about love, in his case, in medicine as sort of an attractive force of desire that explains kind of phenomena, physical phenomena. So he says, medicine is simply the science of the effects of love on repletion and depletion of the body. And the hallmark of the accomplished physician is his ability to distinguish the love that is noble from the love that is ugly and disgraceful. And so he says, medicine aims toward the concord of opposites, which for Eriksen Marcus is love. So it's like harmony or concordance or agreement. And he argues that many disciplines aim toward love. And this is maybe implicitly ridiculed by Plato, and we might ask, well, why is that? Maybe because it sort of makes material and really kind of mundane something that has the quality of divinity, right? So if you think of love as merely a kind of force in the universe, are you partly missing the point, right? We're talking about love as a god that influences romantic relationships, and here is Eriksen Marcus talking about it as a physical force. So after this summary, we finally get to Aristophanes, who's the comedic writer in attendance. And Aristophanes, even though maybe Plato is intending to make fun of him, makes a kind of lastingly well-known speech about the origin of love. And it's kind of an introduction of a myth that's not a traditional Greek myth, but it's compelling for various reasons. And I'm going to here play you a clip from a musical, sort of contemporary musical called Hedwig and the Angry Inch, where the main character, who's a trans woman, is singing about the origin of love. And really she's pulling from this passage in the Symposium. Okay, so hopefully this won't be too awkward. I realize I'm recording a YouTube video that I'm also playing on my own computer, but here goes. This is Hedwig. Right. So hopefully some of that made sense. Aristophanes is here kind of proposing a theory of love where love is the desire for union with the beloved. And he contextualizes it in this myth where in the beginning there were three types of human people. There were people that had um, four arms and four legs, and the idea is there were children of the sun, children of the moon, right, and children of the earth, and depending on which children they were either like two men, two women, or a man and a woman stuck together. And the idea is the gods kind of got mad at them and split them into two beings. And so depending on which we're originated from, we're constantly seeking that other half of ourselves, that that part of us that went missing when we were split by the gods. And the thought is that like this isn't purely a sexual desire for union, it's a kind of deep kind of desire for wholeness. We're missing half of who we really are. And Aristophanes suggests that there's only one way for human beings to flourish. The idea is we must bring this love to its perfect conclusion so that we may be healed and happy. So love is the result of a brokenness in us that requires healing. I want you to notice how all of these theories are different from each other, how they are all differentially responding to the question of what is love, and also the question of why is love praiseworthy. And in this context, Plato, we think through Socrates, might be giving his own theory, not only of what love is, but also, as you'll see, he'll build in some of his other metaphysical views about the forms and how they play a role in explaining his particular theory of love that falls out of this metaphysical picture. So you've got at least a couple of different theories. One is that love is a kind of force in the universe. One that love is a desire for union with the beloved. One that love is kind of this more generic, familiar thing that that is a relationship between a lover and a beloved, and it's sort of intended to better people in their relationships. And finally, a view on which, love is flawed. It has these characteristics that vary depending on whether it's kind of a sexualized love or a more heavenly love in a different form. And Socrates is going to give us a yet further view about what love is. And as we'll see, one key character who's going to burst into the scene is Socrates' young lover at this point in history, who is sort of the center for Plato's writing of a lot of the sort of controversies that arose from Socrates' life, and the things that Plato maybe believes led to Socrates' eventual execution. That is, this young boy at this time who's enraptured with Socrates, but who can't get Socrates' affection. And maybe it's partly because this young man doesn't understand how Socrates operates and what really is driving Socrates' nobility. And this frustrated love is maybe going to predict some of the calamities that will arise. As a way to maybe highlight that view, we have one final speech before we get to Socrates. And that's the speech given by Agathon, whose house this is being hosted at, this symposium, this drinking party is being hosted at. And Agathon is a tragedian, right? So he writes sad things about how things end up terribly for everyone. And yet his speech on love is a speech praising it as the sort of most beautiful and the best and the happiest of the gods. He says that that it's the most delicate of the gods. It lands only on soft places. And love has the power to bring people together and to civilize people. It's this very idealistic speech, but of course it's coming from a tragedian. So one might wonder here, is like Plato trying to cast aspersions on love indirectly by, in the voice of a tragedian, praising love, maybe that's supposed to sound ironic. Maybe that's supposed to kind of flashbulb moment. We should maybe watch out. It's going to turn out that love is actually maybe the harbinger of a lot of bad stuff. Maybe misunderstanding love and thinking it's this great and amazing force is not always the best idea. So what sort of view is going to come out of Socrates in this dialogue? And Socrates actually does go on to say, I thought you should tell the truth about whatever you praise, and I don't think anybody has been telling the truth. It's kind of like a backhanded slap at everyone else. And he says, look, I'm not going to praise love when I give my speech. I'm just going to tell the truth about love. And it's going to turn out that the truth about love isn't going to necessarily make it look all that great all the time. But that doesn't mean either that it's going to be all bad. We start off with Socrates essentially through his, Socratic method. He's asking questions of other people, but it turns out he thinks that love is a desire, a kind of desire, and a desire for a specific kind of thing, which is beauty. And the thing is that on this theory, in order to desire something, you must not already possess it. So there's sort of a presupposition that if you want something, it must mean you don't already have it. Unclear whether this is an accurate, true-sounding premise, right? Is it not possible to desire what you currently have? Or maybe that's a misunderstanding of the word desire. I think Plato, Socrates here might have a good case for the idea that desire implies a lack, but how much of a lack, right? So Socrates suggests if love is a desire for beauty, then that means love itself is not beautiful. That is, love lacks beauty, and that's the explanation of why it desires beauty. And he inserts another thought here, which is good things, the things that are good, are always beautiful. Beautiful maybe in a transcendent way, right? Not necessarily in a superficial way. So if good things are always beautiful, then it turns out that love doesn't only desire beauty, it also means love will need beauty. We get here also to a moment where we ask, how true is this deduction? Is it deductively valid? Is this an argument we can follow? And it seems like Plato is sort of aware of this problem because he has Socrates cite a source, basically. He says, look, I got all of this from a much smarter person than me. And who is this smart person? Well, it turns out she's a woman. Lovely surprise, right? Her name is Diotima. And we don't know, unfortunately, whether Diotima was or wasn't a real person. If you read your Waith piece, you might have found out that this is the only source, Plato's the only source we have for Diotima. And so there's a couple of different hypotheses about who Diotima really was. There's a suggestion that maybe she was a reference to a real woman whose name wasn't Diotima, because it wasn't common for women to be named in literary works if they were real people. It was sort of considered uncouth to mention one's wife or one's daughter or something like that in a public conversation. So it's possible Diotima was a real person, but maybe her name wasn't Diotima. Whatever the case might be, Socrates is saying, I got this from an authoritative source. The authoritative source is Diotima, who's a woman who's wise about many things, and actually is implied she taught Socrates about love. And according to this expert, love is neither beautiful nor good. Right, so further support for the former conclusion. However, she also sort of seems to know what else might be going on wrong with this argument, and it seems like she has pointed out to Socrates in the past that love being neither beautiful nor good doesn't mean that love is ugly and bad, right? What it does mean, though, is that love isn't actually a god. And that's a pretty sacrilegious thing to say. So we need a story to back it up. And Diotima tells us a story. It's going to turn out that love has sort of pseudo-divine origins, but it's not itself a god. It's just kind of like a daimon or a spirit, some kind of semi-divine object. Okay, so the story that Diotima tells is that that love is the son not of Aphrodite, but of a drunk god named resource, poros, or way or resource, and an opportunist, poverty with a capital P, Peña. So Peña and poros together conceive love. And he lives like a homeless beggar who loves wisdom and is clever. And it just so happens that love, as Diotima puts it, was conceived on the day that Aphrodite was born. So there was a party for Aphrodite, and these gods end up commingling, and they create this other being, love. And love lives like a homeless beggar who loves wisdom and is clever with potions and with enchantments, but who doesn't have wisdom or beauty. Love desires wisdom, and love desires beauty. But this has to mean that love on this picture isn't a god, because of course the gods are already wise. The gods already have beauty. They already have this divinity. So love must love these qualities, but must not have it himself, right? Or itself, I suppose. And kind of in response to the very first speech that we heard in this dialogue in the beginning of the symposium, Diotima is going to make it seem like being the lover isn't actually all that great, because being the lover on this view means that you don't have all of these great qualities. So it's the beloved that is noble and good. What is beautiful and good is being loved, because she says it is what is really beautiful and graceful that deserves to be loved. And this is what is perfect and highly blessed. So we might ask, what's the point of loving beautiful things? What do we get from it, right? If it's not good for us as lovers, then why should we love beautiful things? Well, Diotima says, possessing good things gives us happiness. So having nice things around us, things that we like, makes us happy. You might already go like, wait, hold on. I thought the whole thing you were saying earlier, Professor Ortiz, was like, isn't there some background implication in the text that like love is not going to be all that great? Yes. And Diotima here anticipates it. She says, look, love has a general category and it has specific species. So she says, every desire for good things or for happiness is the supreme and even treacherous love in everyone. So anybody who desires good or beautiful things, they are lovers. But there's a specific kind of love that merits the word love, that is, that meets the ideal conditions, like the best kind of love, the love that we should all strive for and all aim for. And what is that love? What is the specific, the best love? Maybe mirroring here the idea of the Uranos Aphrodite, the heavenly Aphrodite. What is the love that belongs to that? Well, love is wanting to possess the good forever, says Diotima. So the real purpose of love is giving birth in beauty, whether in body or in soul. Love doesn't want just beauty, but it wants to reproduce and give birth to beauty. This is a strange kind of metaphysical view. So we have to kind of give some context for it. Why should giving birth here, a very feminine thing to do, amount to possessing the good forever? Well, let's think about the concept of forever for a moment, the concept of eternity for a moment, which we spent some time talking about last week. So forever implies a kind of immortality or eternality, right? And as we know, the gods have these things, and in the Platonic theory of forms, forms have these things. But what do mortals have? Mortals can't achieve immortality, unless we build in here, and Diotima will talk about it, immortality of the soul. But this idea of reproduction is kind of the suggestion that Diotima gives as a bridge, right? So the bridge is love, because it's a desire for the beautiful and a desire for the good. If humans were able to reproduce beauty, it would be kind of a way of extending the existence of beauty. So giving birth, reproducing is a way of extending the lifespan of this thing. And so it's the closest thing, on Diotima's view, that mortals come to immortality. And there's now a path given. And this is going to be particularly important because it's the metaphysical connection to the rest of Plato's view. There's kind of a path that we can take to try to achieve this reproduction of beauty. It's going to look suspiciously a lot like what we heard in the Phaedo about the beautiful, about the good, about the forms that we're seeking. So how do you proceed? 1, devote yourself to beautiful bodies. And then 2, realize that the beauty in one body is the sibling of the beauty in another body. Then 3, become the lover of all of the beautiful bodies. And 4, realize the beauty of people's souls is more valuable and bodies are not important. And then 5, recognize the beauty of knowledge, giving birth, quote, to many gloriously beautiful ideas and theories. And then finally, once we've reproduced intellectually, so not literally as in making babies, but reproducing intellectually, creating new ideas that are beautiful, seeing that beauty is not just corporeal, but it's conceptual, right? Like we were talking about, the forms are extrapolations, they're ideas that we can trace, that it turns out on Plato's view are real things out there somewhere. They're really real. But they're ideas that we can trace and extract, and in extracting this, recognizing that beauty, then we're supposed to see the beautiful always is. The beautiful doesn't come to be or pass away. The beautiful is this eternal thing. And once again, we're going to end up at the conclusion that the beautiful is a form. So the beautiful always is and never comes to be or passes away. And it's eternally beautiful, and not a particular but a universal, such that, and this is a quote, all the other beautiful things share in that without taking from it. So they all participate in it without diminishing it. Socrates then says, suggesting that, that it's through Diotima, that only by seeing the beautiful itself can someone give birth. And here the giving birth is a kind of intellectual giving birth. And give birth to what? Well, to true virtue. How did we get here from talking about love, right? So let's just reconnect again. Love is a kind of desire. What is it a desire of? Well, it's a desire for beautiful things. And ultimately, the love is supposed to get us to a point where we reproduce, where we regenerate. And the sort of literal kind of sexual reproduction is now brought to be. It becomes not a literal sexual reproduction, but a kind of intellectual reproduction. And what is it reproducing? Well, it's reproducing beauty, or in this case, goodness. And the thing is, when we have the wrong object of desire, when we love beautiful things that are physical material bodies and think that's all there is to beauty, we'll make a mistake and we'll reproduce concepts or images that are mere images of virtue. So when we love beautiful boys and we think that's the greatest thing in the world, that's the thing to do, then we will, in attempting to be virtuous for the beautiful boy, we're actually going to fail at achieving true virtue. We're going to achieve like a semblance of virtue, something maybe lesser than the true virtue. But when we can identify in this Platonic way that the true object of our love shouldn't be the beautiful boy, but actually beauty itself, the good itself, then when we desire that and when we pursue that, we will be able to reproduce in our own character true virtue. Okay, I'm gonna let that sink in for a minute. So this speech goes from, at first apparently insulting love, right, as a lesser god, to to really indirectly praising love, because if we're true lovers in the Socratic form of true lovers of obviously of wisdom, of the knowledge that we are missing, then we will come to know, we will understand that objects are but mere temporary places where beauty sort of sits herself or something like that. And we should seek the place, the real image, the real thing that is beauty. And when we get to understand that that thing is an abstract, universal thing, it's not just particularly installed in this things, it's just sort of like temporarily gifting itself in. When we see that it's like a real out there in this abstract form, this universal form, as a form, capital F, then we will have wisdom. Then we will possess the thing that will guide our characters, and we won't be misled, right? The implication is we won't be subject to this irrational sexual obsession that sometimes takes us over when we meet a beautiful person that calls to our souls. This obsession that we have, like, I need to have you, I need to possess you, I'm obsessed by the materiality that you are. That thing we might think, if we speak like some of these other speech givers, that is going to be good, that's a way to live, that's a positive way to live. But on this, maybe Platonic view, this view that Diotima shares with us, that's actually wrong-headed, that's irrational. But there is a rational kind of love, right? Eros can have reason, it can participate in reason, but it needs accurate vision, accurate intellectual vision. And this is where, again, we come upon this idea that in Plato, knowledge is a kind of seeing. It's a kind of seeing correctly. So when you see the beautiful boy, you should learn that the body of the beautiful boy isn't the place where beauty lives. It's just a place where it's hanging out for a time, right? And it's going to leave when in this case, I don't mean to be talking about boys myself, right? But it's going to leave when the boy becomes older. The boy is going to lose some of that beauty. And we might then seek it in another body, but we'll find out, no, that body is not the true home of the beauty either, right? The true home of beauty, we might think for a moment, maybe it's people's souls, right? Plato often writes Socrates as if he has a beautiful soul. That's the seat of beauty. But as we spend time with Socrates, maybe we also realize his soul isn't the seat of beauty either. That's not where the eternal beauty lies. His soul is also just participating in this bigger thing that is beauty, right? And maybe we think, oh, well, maybe knowledge is the seat of beauty. The Socrates in the Apology certainly seems to think like knowledge is the thing at which we are all aiming. But it'll turn out that it's the beauty itself isn't itself knowledge. It gives us knowledge. If we participate in it, we will know it. If we see it, we will know it. And that's the thing that we need. We need the true transcendental, if you like, beauty. That for us nowadays will seem like it's just an abstract concept. It's not really real. We have to understand that for Plato, it really is real. Really does exist. It's the thing that we maybe wish that we could grasp, that if we could grasp it, would give us happiness that will last not for a mortal lifespan, but forever. Because it's the source of all of the things that give us joy. And that's the thing that we are ultimately pursuing when we're pursuing something with love. Kind of a powerful theory, right? Unfortunately, this beautiful moment of reverie, of philosophical kind of enlightenment, is going to be crashed. And who crashes the party but Alcibiades? He's kind of the Platonic bad guy, besides the people who put Socrates to death and who vote him to sort of die. Alcibiades is the real kind of villain of this story because he's the bad student. And Alcibiades is crashing this party, and we will find out that Alcibiades in his youth is obsessed with Socrates. And so he's already drunk when he arrives. And unfortunately, Alcibiades has missed this speech that Socrates has given about Diotima's views and what's so great and noble about them, and the sort of true nature of love. And nonetheless, Alcibiades wants to participate in this symposium. He also wants to give a speech in praise of love. And because he's currently obsessed with Socrates, it is Socrates that he praises. He begins by saying, Socrates looks like a satyr. Which is not a nice thing to say about someone. So satyrs are these like ancient Greek goat men. They've got really hairy legs and kind of large body parts that I won't mention. And they're grotesque. You know, in ancient Greece, they were seen as these like grotesque sexual creatures. So he says that Socrates looks like a satyr. So that's already kind of mean. And he also, Alcibiades, accuses Socrates of bewitching people. He says, Socrates, you make people feel like their lives aren't worth living. And you're making me feel ashamed for my way of life, for the way that I spend my time trying to pursue politics. And you think I'm kind of gross and I'm sort of, I guess, whoring myself out for politics or something. And Alcibiades suggests that nonetheless, he's fallen madly in love with Socrates because he's seen Socrates' soul. And for Alcibiades, Socrates' soul is like dazzlingly beautiful. In spite of the fact that he's ugly on the outside, Socrates is beautiful on the inside. He really, truly cares about what's good and virtuous, right? And he's a true lover of wisdom. And so that's attractive, right? A smart man who sort of really tests you and really cares about you being the best version of yourself, you know, that's attractive to Alcibiades. And so he says, I was forced to love you, and I've tried many ways of getting your attention, and I keep failing, and you play hard to get. And you know, at some point the speeches end, and Alcibiades continues trying to seduce Socrates. What he really, really wants is to be with Socrates in a sexual way, and Socrates kind of isn't interested. It's not that Socrates doesn't think Alcibiades is beautiful. Alcibiades is allegedly one of the most beautiful boys in Athens right now. He's dazzling, right? But Socrates isn't interested in physical love, and so he is sort of spurning Alcibiades. And Alcibiades is really trying to get with him. He's sort of talking about all the great things he's done in the army and like how cool he is, and how brave Socrates is. And inadvertently, he's sort of revealing how deeply in love he is with Socrates. And so there's kind of this tension. Sort of Alcibiades is committing a very basic Platonic sin of not even knowing himself. Alcibiades claims that the person he really loves is Agathon, who's just won for his tragedy. But it's so clear, you know, like we all know someone who's in denial that they still love someone. And Alcibiades is very, very much in denial about loving Socrates, but he's clearly head over heels in love with him and being very irrational, right? He's drunk, he's giving this freewheeling speech, he's insulting Socrates, but he's praising Socrates, he doesn't know himself, right? And in the end, they fall asleep. Alcibiades never gets Socrates to sleep with him. Socrates stays up all night talking about dramatic writing, and he ends up leaving in the morning. And what does this all tell us in the end about love? Well, I don't know that it solves the perennial problems of love, but it is a beautiful piece of dramatic writing by Plato. In a way, it's also a beautiful piece of philosophy. And it does get us to think about the practical applications of the theory of forms. How do the forms operate on us? Well, it turns out if we don't know them very well, if we haven't seen them in their proper form and recognized them, it's like Plato is predicting that we will not be able to act well or rightly. Alcibiades knows enough to know that Socrates has a beautiful soul, and that makes him lovable. And it's not that he's wrong about that. Beautiful souls are lovable. We should love people with beautiful souls and with wisdom. The mistake that maybe Alcibiades is making is thinking that this love already entitles him to possessing the object of his love. But really he's wrong, because the object of his love isn't really even Socrates, right? I mean, also he's supposed to like not really know that he's still in love with Socrates, but let's put that aside, right? The true object of Alcibiades' love is supposed to be the form of the beautiful. What he really loves is the thing that is beautiful, the thing that is good. That's the thing that we really all deeply, if we were aware of it, that's the thing that we love. And until we recognize it, and until we understand how to pursue that object and how to pursue it in an ethical way, to the best of our ability, with the best of our characters, we're going to make mistakes and we're going to be irrational. Maybe the suggestion is we're going to be as irrational as Alcibiades is being here in the way he is interacting with Socrates. We're going to be like drunken fools, kind of groping at the thing that we want and thinking that behaving in ways that are really unproductive are going to get us what we want. And it's going to turn out we're wrong about what we want, and also we're not going about getting the thing that we want in the way that it will actually get us the thing that we want. And maybe if we do better, we would be better people, like Socrates. Maybe Socrates really knows what it's about. Maybe he's about to get what he really wants. All right. Thank you so much. Next time we'll talk about the Republic and the theory of forms as given in the Republic. So see you all soon. Bye.